What's happening? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRFTV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition. We're going to go back and take a look at a few stakes races from this past weekend, the weekend of November the 17th and November the 18th. If you are listening in podcast, like many of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. If you're over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, write us a review, give us a positive rating. It's always greatly appreciated. We'll also give you a brief stakes montage for the races that we don't totally go in depth with as far as the recaps are concerned, and also get you the weekend's best as far as buyer speed figure performances are concerned, and a little bit of what's on deck for the rest of the week, DRFTV, the schedule of events, but knowing the holiday is right around the corner, Thanksgiving is on Thursday, so the schedule is going to be a little bit different this week. Let's dive into the first in-depth recap of the weekend. We're going to take a look at the eighth race, 7 furlongs, on Saturday afternoon at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club. This is the field of 5 2-year-olds that ran in the Grade 3 Bob Hope. You had a few scratches prior to the race. You take out Sueño, take out Metropole, left you this field of 5 Mucho Gusto for Bob Baffert making his second lifetime start. He was bet down to odds of 4-5. He was the favorite over Sparkyville, who was the second choice at odds of 5-2. And ultimately, Mucho Gusto did not disappoint. Here is Trevor Denman with the stretch run of the Bob Hope.
These three noses apart, Extra Hope in with a shot from fourth. Homeward bound now. On the inside, Mucho Gusto. Sparkyville on the outside, Savagery. None of them will give an inch. Mucho Gusto now takes the advantage. Mucho Gusto, Sparkyville. Mucho Gusto fully extended, but comes home gamely to win the Bob Hope. Mucho Gusto, Savagery, Sparkyville, and Extra.
Mucho Gusto at odds of 4-5. Is your winner of the Grade 3 Bob Hope. He wins over Savagery, who runs second at odds of 7-1. Sparkyville runs third at odds of 5-2, and Extra Hope runs fourth at odds of 7-2. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at your winner, Mucho Gusto. Mucho Gusto is a 2-year-old now. He's really done nothing wrong. He's only raced twice, and he has 2 victories, $84,000 in career earnings, owned by Michael Lund Peterson, trained by Bob Baffert, bred by Teneri Farm Incorporated and Bernardo Alvarez Calderon in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Joe Talamo. And you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Breeders' Cup Classic winner Mucho Macho Man, out of a Giants Causeway mare named It's a Giant Causeway. 86 buyer speed figure for Mucho Gusto winning the Bob Hope. He gets his final eighth of a mile in 13:19. Kind of compared that to a horse like Savagery, who was in close attendance. He earns an 83 buyer and comes home in 13:34. So a slower finish for that final eighth of a mile for the runner-up. Mucho Gusto, he went out there. He relaxed very kindly on the front end. I thought it was a very impressive performance, all things considered. Again, a second-time starter. You throw some things at them this time around. Not going to be quite as easy as that debut. He's also proven now that he can win at different racetracks. He debuted at Los Alamitos and then comes here and wins this race off of a little bit of a layoff. I think you have to acknowledge the fact that this field, there was no real passing that happened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 throughout the entirety of the run. Savagery and Sparkyville, they were in closest attendance. Extra Hope was down on the inside in the pocket, tipped out, put in a bid, but couldn't really make up too much ground considering those other horses weren't stopping. For reference sake, the fractions 22-1, 45-1, 10-1 for 3/4. They stopped the clock in 23-2. Timeform US hasn't released any figures yet, and they haven't released anything as far as the track is concerned. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't think the track was anything as far as speed. I thought it was pretty straightforward. So this was just one of those instances where I think they went a moderate pace. I think 45-1 is going to look honest. I think it was more on the moderate side because they weren't really going guns blazing up the backside. And I think that potentially compromised anyone trying to make up any sort of ground, including an Extra Hope, including a Sparkyville. But that's not to take anything away from Mucho Gusto. I think he did what he was supposed to do. Went out there, looked very good. You hear Baffert afterward. He was quoted saying, "I like how when he made the lead, he relaxed." You know what they're made of second time out, or you find out what they're made of second time out. He's going to be pointed toward the Grade 1 Los Alamitos Futurity, going 2 turns on December the 9th, which, again, based on what he's done already at Los Al, I think that makes plenty of sense. Baffert also has another horse called Improbable who's going to be pointing for that race. You may have seen him win that Street Sense Stakes at Churchill Downs on the Breeders' Cup Saturday undercard. So clearly Baffert's going to be well represented. What else is new? He debuted a monster, or a horse that looks like it could be a monster, earlier on in the day at Del Mar called Coliseum. Again, Baffert is just loaded for bear here, ready to go with 2-year-olds, soon to be 3-year-olds. As far as Savagery and Sparkyville are concerned, I thought they both ran just fine. Again, Sparkyville, he was the second choice in here. He finished in 13:38 as opposed to Savagery, who came home in 13:34. They both earned 83 Beyer speed figures. I think they're both nice horses. I think you're going to have opportunities for them. I don't know if additional distance is necessarily ideal for those two, whereas it looks like for a horse like Mucho Gusto, additional distance is going to be what he wants. And I think particularly additional distance will be what Extra Hope wants when you see the way that he finished and galloped out. And again, it wasn't the easiest of trips for this horse because no one really made up any ground, or I shouldn't say that. The horses that were forward didn't really stop. They continued on. And there was a moment down the backside when we had a little bit of an accordion effect where Mucho Gusto, he opened up by about a length and a quarter, and then Joe Talamo got him to relax very nicely, and he just kind of came to hand. You had those two horses on the outside, Sparkyville and Savagery, move up. You also had a horse like Extra Hope move up, and Flavien Prat for a moment had to just, I don't even want to say tap on the brakes, but he had to wait. Then all of a sudden, Mucho Gusto again extended, and again, that little bit of an accordion effect. I think Extra Hope's going to be a nice one. Get him going back 2 turns, and we'll see what we got there. But at the end of the day, this was a very impressive effort from Mucho Gusto in his second lifetime start. 86 Beyer. It sounds like we are on to bigger and better things. We'll try him at 2 turns in his next start. He is pointing to the Grade 1 Los Alamitos Futurity on December the 9th. Mucho Gusto gets the job done with an 86 in the Bob Hope. Saturday's feature at Churchill Downs was the Grade 3 River City Handicap. Let's take a look at the field. Scratched down to only a field of 5. I think mainly in part due to the tiring nature of the turf course. It was officially listed as yielding. Your favorite at odds of 3 to 5 was Mr. Misunderstood. Brad Cox came in here. He had basically a two-headed monster in this race. He had the class of the field and Mr. Misunderstood. He also had the pace in the field with big changes. Now the question for big changes was, how would he handle better horses? How would he handle 1 mile and an eighth? And how would he handle some significant cut in the ground? Outside of those two, you could make some cases for some others, but admittedly, you needed to take a little bit of a stab. Ultimately, a very formful result. Here we go. Mr. Misunderstood gets the job done at odds of 3 to 5 over. Big changes, the pace setter at odds of 5 to 2. Team Colors runs third at odds of 8 to 1 in this field of 5. Let's take a look at Mr. Misunderstood a little bit more. 12 of 21 lifetime, 3 other times in the money, over $772,000 in career earnings, owned by Flurry Racing Stables, LLC, trained by Brad Cox, bred by Athens Woods in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Florent Giroux. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Arch out of an Afternoon Delights mare named Jody's Delight. 97 Beyer speed figure winning this race for Mr. Misunderstood. He comes home in 12:32. Big changes. The pace setter earns a 96 and comes home, in 12:39. You look and see the way this race was run. Fractions of 25 and 4, 52 and 2 for a half, 18 and 3 for 3/4. I think it was a combination of things where there wasn't any real pace in this race outside of big changes. And also, you combine that with that tiring nature in the yielding turf course, you're going to end up with a slow final time of 1:55 and 4 for 9 furlongs. Mr. Misunderstood, in the grand scheme of things, sat a pretty perfect trip in just a few lengths off, down on the inside, saving ground. Big Changes was the one out there setting the tempo. Sir Dudley Diggs was forwardly placed. He eventually faded down the lane. Team Colors was slightly farther back. Flatlined essentially never was involved at any point. When the real running began, Florent Giroux tips Mr. Misunderstood out into the clear, goes, and credit where credit's due to Big Changes. He stuck around very, very gamely, and it only looks like it was a half length. He really fought on. I think there's a real scenario, and I realized Mr. Misunderstood was kind of geared down toward the very end, but Big Changes fought on very, very valiantly, and especially for a horse that I had concerns about the additional distance, getting out to 1 mile and an eighth, and over a turf course that was laboring. I thought this was a very, very nice effort, and this could be an interesting horse next year in some of these more middle distance races. I still prefer him slightly shorter, 1 mile to 1 mile and a 16th. As for Mr. Misunderstood, Brad Cox was quoted after the race saying, Mr. Misunderstood will probably get a little bit of a break before we bring him back at Fairgrounds, and if he keeps improving, we'll keep the Breeders' Cup on our target for next year. That would probably be indicating a race like the Mile, and keep in mind the Breeders' Cup next year will be out on the West Coast, out at Santa Anita Park in Southern California. Very generally firm turf course. And we know that Mr. Misunderstood, he can handle anything thrown his way. Some yielding turf, distance shouldn't be an issue. I think he is best suited for a mile as opposed to anything longer than this. I feel like if this was a better group, no disrespect to Big Changes or anyone else, a better group, a mile and an eighth, perhaps a little bit far from Mr. Misunderstood. I do believe he's at his absolute best when he's going slightly shorter. But look, you can't knock anything that this horse has done. When you win more than 50% of your lifetime starts and you've earned almost $750,000 or more than $750,000, there's really not a lot to knock about this horse. He shows up. He has some versatility. He can come from farther off. He can be forwardly placed. And he got another very, very patient and great ride from Florent Giroux and a great ride from Julien Leparoux on the front end with Big Changes, but not quite enough to hold off the big horse. Mr. Misunderstood gets the job done in the Grade 3 River City Handicap at Churchill Downs with a 97 Beyer speed figure. Let's shift our attention to Sunday and shift our attention north of the border. The featured event at Woodbine on Sunday was the 8th race, a mile and an eighth for 2-year-olds. The Coronation Futurity. This is a really interesting race for a number of reasons. You take a look at the field, 7 of them went forward. Mile and an eighth for 2-year-olds at this time of year. I really recognize that we're starting to get to the point where they'll soon enough be 3-year-olds. But there's no guarantee. This is a long, long distance for a number of these boys. And really, Avies Flatter had not done anything wrong in his career to date through 3 lifetime starts. But this was still a pretty giant ask, going 2 turns, a mile and an eighth on the synthetic, as opposed to his most recent victory, which came going 1 turn over the turf. It looked like, from a talent standpoint, he has it in spades, but you never know until they actually go out and do it. He was bet down to 3-5, and he did not disappoint. Here's the stretch run of the Coronation Futurity.
Smooth and now wide on the track. Avies Flatter starts to run home, but Tripwire on the outside. Out wide, Avies Flatter coming fast. Avies Flatter right down the outside, swamps them in a blink of an eye. Into second, Federal Law, and what a move by Avies Flatter. Avies Flatter in the Coronation Futurity in front. Federal Law a game second, but Avies Flatter goes on to win. Avies Flatter 3 parts to Federal Law, 3.5 to Moon Swings, then Tripwire.
Avies Flatter gets the job done at odds of 3-5 over Federal Law, who ran a very, very game second on a quick turnaround on 2 weeks' notice at odds of 6-1 as the third choice, and Moon Swings. A very, very fine effort for this horse at odds of 28-1 to run third. Tripwire, the second choice in here, finishes fourth at 5-2 beneath John Velasquez. Let's take a look at Avies Flatter. He is 3 of 4 lifetime, over $251,000 in career earnings, owned by Avendalos, trained by Josie Carroll, bred by Tall Oaks Farm in Ontario, ridden to victory by Eurico Rosa de Silva, and you can see the pedigree. He is by Flatter out of an Empire Maker mare named Avies Empire. 76 Beyer speed figure. It may not look sexy on paper for Avies Flatter winning this, the Coronation Futurity, but when you consider he was as wide as he was throughout, the fact that he was dealing with some legitimately good horses, I think Federal Law is very talented. I think some of these other horses, perhaps they're not doing ultimately what they'll want to do. D Magician was the pace setter. He just couldn't relax. I think he's going to be better going shorter. But I think Tripwire's an okay horse. But Federal Law, I think, is quite nice, and I really think Avies Flatter could be a serious talent here. He comes home in 12.64, and you compare that to Federal Law, who came home in 12.52. Okay, you can say Federal Law finished better, but when you consider the trip that Federal Law had and you compare that to Avies Flatter's, to me, there's really no question that Avies Flatter ran a far superior race in here. But that doesn't mean that Federal Law ran poorly. I just think both of them are very, very interesting going forward. And keep in mind, the other piece to always think about with these races, and this isn't always the case because you do occasionally get Kentucky breds and you get, horses bred from other jurisdictions. But Avies Flatter is an Ontario bred. And at a mile and an eighth as a 2-year-old, this was a very, very sort of, I'm not going to say breathtaking, because that's a little bit over the top. But it was a very, very visually impressive blitz that he put on the field on the far turn, considering the ground that he had given up. And if he's doing this at 9 furlongs as a 2-year-old, you got to think the Connections have got a big smile on their face, and they can't help but think to Canada's largest prize for the 3-year-olds, the Canadian sort of Kentucky Derby, if you will, with the Queen's Plate that will come up in the middle of July at a 1.25 miles. I think Avies Flatter is an incredibly talented horse. We featured him on Out of the Gate as a horse watch months back when he made his career debut. Thought he ran just fine in that Grade 1 up at Woodbine on the turf when he ran into Fog of War for Chad Brown. Then he came back and he won that Cup and Saucer, and he comes back and he smashes in here. And I know it's only a half length, but I thought this was a thoroughly decisive victory. And Federal Law, let's not sleep on him. I think he's going to be a nice one down the road for Mark Cassie as well. But to me, the star of this show is Avies Flatter. The star potentially in the making going forward up in Canada is Avies Flatter. He gets the job done for Josie Carroll in the Coronation Futurity at 9 furlongs. 76 buyer for a 2-year-old, and it looks like he has all the potential in the world. We'll find out what he turns into as a soon-to-be 3-year-old. Last race we'll recap here this weekend came from Del Mar on Sunday. This was the field for the Cary Grant Stakes, 7/8 of a mile for Cal-bred or sired 3-year-olds and up. Your post-time favorite was Edwards Going Left. This was the horse that I thought was the most likely winner. He was the horse that I picked in this race when I did the stakes preview last weekend. For a number of reasons, it felt very simple. I mean, he had run against Grade 1 company in 2 of his 3 most recent starts. He'd faced Roy H. and Ransom of the Moon, 2 Grade 1 winners. One of them is going to be a 2-time Eclipse Award winner for Champion Sprinter. So, okay, those 2, he was in a little bit tough. And then 2 starts back, they ran him at Los Alamitos, going 2 turns at a distance that is just a little bit too far for him. I think this is really the first realistic opportunity he had had to win a race in quite some time. Outside of him, there were a couple horses I was a little bit suspect of. Horse like Touching Rainbows. I just never really saw the giant draw for a horse like this. He ended up working out a pretty good trip. We'll dive into that here more momentarily. And then I was surprised by a little bit of the wagering when you see a horse like Grecian Fire taking as much money as he did. He's bet down to odds of 6-1. A horse that I thought really you were looking at a minor award as a ceiling was Solid Wager. Given the fact that it felt like at this point in his career, maybe a high 80 kind of buyer was going to be the ceiling for him, and I didn't think that would be fast enough to win in a spot like this. Well, 2 things. A high 80 buyer was not fast enough to win, but Solid Wager clearly had a little bit something left in the tank. Here's the stretch run of this year's Cary Grant.
Left, Touching Rainbows. Solid Wager in the black cap on the outside. These 3 line up as they come to the 8th bowl. It's Solid Wager down the center doing best. And Solid Wager now grabs the lead and starts to kick away. And from here on in, it's just a matter of how far Solid Wager and Drayden Van Dyke outclassed them in the Cary Grant Stakes. Edwards Going Left and he's 2nd. Brandon the Bartender flying for 3rd.
Solid Wager blows the doors off this field. Wins by almost 7 lengths, gets the job done over Edwards Going Left, the 8-5 favorite in this spot. And Brando the Bartender trying a main track dirt effort for the first time in quite some time, and a fast track for the first time, I believe, in his entire career. Rallied from well off the pace at odds of 16-1. Let's take a look at Solid Wager at this point in his career. He's run 47 times with 10 victories, 13 times 2nd or 3rd. Over $740,000 in career earnings, owned by Gary and Cecil Barber and Stanford Stable. Take a look. He's trained by Peter Miller. Bred by Madeira Thoroughbreds LLC in California. Ridden to victory by Drayden Van Dyke, and you can see the pedigree. He is by Bird on the Wire out of a Valid Wager mare named G-Ma. 97 buyer speed figure for Solid Wager. Came home in 12:53. Compare that to Edwards Going Left, who finished 2nd. He came home in 13:34. Not only did Solid Wager win, he was drawing away for fun at the end of this race. The 97 buyer, if I pull up Formulator really quickly, you can go through and you can filter down buyer speed figures, and it will give you each of the most recent 11 buyer speed figures that these horses have run. And Solid Wager, this is the fastest race he's run in that time, and only 2 other occasions had he eclipsed a 90 buyer. He had been living in the 85 to 89 range really for the majority of these past, give it 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. So the fact that this came, you look at it and you go, my goodness, where did it come from? But then again, Peter Miller's quotes after the race, they make sense. This was his track and this is his distance. Miller was quoted when discussing there was a race earlier in the card that was an optional claimer, and he could have run for the $40,000 tag, which he has for, I believe, the last 3 or 4 races And Miller said that the rationale was this is his favorite track, 7/8 is his favorite distance, and I thought he'd get a good pace setup. In fact, he did get a good pace setup. That was one where the pace projector was a little bit off. They thought it would be a little bit more on the comfortable side. 22-2, 44-4 for a half mile, 9-4 for 3/4. They stopped the clock in 22-2. So the pace did develop, and you can tell that's evidenced by Solid Wager, and also Brando the bartender coming from as far back as he did. Edwards going left. He was a little bit sluggish out of the gate, which to me is always a concern. Tyler Bays pushed on him, got him into a decent enough position. He came with his run and just got absolutely engulfed by the winner. Touching Rainbows, I should probably give him some credit in this spot. I thought it was a pretty perfect trip in the grand scheme of things, but if you believe that pace was on the faster side, then he certainly could have been compromised by that. Perhaps a slightly shorter distance and maybe a little bit more of an advantageous pace situation will help him next time out. I have a crazy thought. Solid Wager is a Calbred, and there are a number of Calbred prizes for him, and 7/8 is his distance, and Del Mar is his track. There's a race coming up in New York in just under 2 weeks. This is being recorded on Monday the 19th. The Cigar Mile will be run on December the 1st. If I had anything to do with the horse, I would go through and make sure first and foremost that he comes out and he's in good order and feeling fine. And on the heels of this effort, when you think of the Cigar Mile field and what it could potentially be and the names that will not be there, I'd imagine you're going to have a pretty full field and a pretty wide open betting affair. We've seen numerous times in the past the West Coast horses go east and have success. I don't know if that would work for Solid Wager, but it would be something that I would personally consider. Again, the connections will do right by the horse. He's 7 years old. Peter Miller has said he's been around since he was a baby, so this is one of their pets in the barn. But to me, it would just be sort of an interesting spot to see if all of a sudden this field for the Cigar looks like it's just completely wide open, where your favorite's going to be 7-2 or 4-1. Why not take a shot? Send him out there on the heels of an effort like this. He was that impressive. This was a giant performance from Solid Wager. He gets the job done. In the Calbred Cary Grant Stakes, $100,000 was the purse. He gets it done with a 97 buyer drawing away at the end, 7/8 of a mile. If they're content, giving him a little bit of time, taking care of the old boy for sure. But if you came out of this in good form, why not take a shot at a big race? You got a big purse out east in a few weeks, the Grade 1 Cigar Mile. Who knows? I'm just throwing that out there. They haven't made any comments. That would just be something I would be taking a look at if I were involved. That's going to wrap it up as far as the recaps are concerned, but we do have a few more stakes races that we want to at least get out there and let you take a look at the stretch runs of. So here is this week's very brief stakes montage. When we come back, we'll dive into the weekend's best from a buyer standpoint, and we'll get you ready for what's on tap for the rest of the week here on DRFTV. Here's the stakes montage.
On the inside of Exulting, control group just in front. Exulting is ahead, back second. Just behind them, Village King dives down toward the rail. On the extreme outside, Red Knight. Solio is also in with a chance. Solio, Red Blinkers on the outside, and Village King. These two going on with it as control group and Exulting are softened up. It's Village King just in front here. Solio, Village King, Solio in a thriller. Photo finish, Village
Top
King.
the lane by nearly 4 over Line Judge. Then comes Secret Passage, who dives down to the rail but has his work cut out for him. Masito Rojo looks strong in the lane. It's Masito Rojo and Philemon Rodriguez to score in the Delta Mile. Line Judge ran second. Secret Passage was
Notice
third.
me and Preferred Guest ducks about. Miss Ariel on the inside. Notice me the center. And now if Preferred Guest has anything there, is going to be the one to run them down. But notice me in front. Preferred Guest on the outside. Preferred Guest comes now and grabs Notice Me and finally gets the win at a very high level. A deserved one. Preferred Guest wins
For the King, turns for home, loaded. He's in front by 3. Sudden Surprise on the outside takes second. Tribeca battles on at the rail. They're inside the final 1/8 of a mile, and it's gold for the King, overwhelming the competition. He's going to win by himself under Joel Rosario. It's a good battle for second as Winston's chance comes from nowhere, but it's all gold for the King in the Thunder Rumble division of the New York Stallion Series. Winston
There you have this week's brief stakes montage, and let's throw it right into the weekend's best performances from a Beyer speed figure standpoint. We'll kick it off with the 2-year-old males on dirt. Very, very impressive career debut from Coliseum down at Del Mar. He breaks his maiden on debut with a 91 Beyer speed figure for Baffert and Godolphin. Looks like he could be any kind going forward. 2-year-old fillies on dirt. Super Escape Belial, 69 Beyers, won in a maiden special weight race, won in a non-winners of one other than at Laurel Park. 2-year-old males on turf. Bob and Jackie and Omaha Beach. They both earn 80 Beyers in a maiden special weight at Del Mar. 2-year-old fillies on turf. Play On, a 76 in a maiden special weight down at the fairgrounds. 3-year-old males on dirt. Share the Ride, a 90 Beyer in a non-winners of two other than at Parks. 3-year-old fillies on dirt. You got a whole slew of them. Electric Forest, Auspicious Babe, Go Google Yourself, Cathedral Reader. All 82 Beyers, one in a non-winners of one other than at Aqueduct, the two middle ones, a non-winners of two other than at Churchill, and the last one, an allowance race at Churchill Downs. 3-year-old males on turf. Illudaire, a 91 in a non-winners of two other than at the Big A. 3-year-old fillies on turf. Santino, an 82 Beyer in a non-winners of one other than at the fairgrounds. Older males on dirt. Gold for the King, a 98 in the New York Stallion Series race on Sunday afternoon at the Big A. Older fillies and mares. Hours to Run, an 89 in a stakes race down at the fairgrounds. Older males on turf we spoke about. Mr. Misunderstood earlier in this program. 97 Beyer winning the River City Handicap at Churchill. And then older fillies and mares on turf. Lady Chrome, an 84 Beyer and an N1X up at Golden Gate in Northern California. There you have it. The weekend's best from a Beyer speed figure standpoint here on the Matt Bernier Show. Let's give a quick look at the DRFTV schedule of events. This week is going to be short and abbreviated because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but you will have plenty of stakes previews. You'll have races of the day all over the place. You'll have some formulator angles. You'll have the recap edition here. There won't be a preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. I'm not totally sure what the boys are doing for the DRF Players podcast. I do know that we will be off this week as far as Out of the Gate is concerned. So a few different things just sort of changing just due to the fact that the holiday is on Thursday this week. Certainly throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into things. I will be filling in for the Weekend Warrior Mike Watchmaker this week, so you can find that over on DRF.com. And I will tweet out the NFL Week 12 trifecta as this is being recorded on Monday. We don't know just yet if we'll be to the positive or the negative for this week because split 1-1 on Sunday, and we'll find out tonight about the Chiefs and the Rams. This should be a fun game to watch. If you've been listening to this live on Tuesday at noon, thank you for doing so. Live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. If you listen to this in podcast, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. You will get all the latest from DRF TV. And if you're over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or however you take them in, write us a review. Give us a positive rating. Always, always greatly appreciated. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Everyone, enjoy the holiday. Don't do anything silly. Go out there, have some fun, but be safe. Enjoy the racing for this holiday weekend. Best of luck however you play, whatever you play, wherever you play. I will be back with the recap edition next Tuesday. Going back and taking a look at a number of races over this holiday weekend. So, again, best of luck. Until next time, this has been the Matt Bernier Show.